Hey, I'm Andrew, and you're watching DevTips. So last week, I created a React component without using React. It was pretty cool. I showed you how the process of creating an element and then further down attaching the element to the fragment and then appending that fragment to the root, which was defined here on the index file. And I told you about how this is the same file makeup of a React file. So today we're going to the next step, which is installing a React application, starting it, making sure it works, and then converting over counter.js, or rather this little component here, over to the React application. Now, if you read my article, which will be up in the top right corner with the card, you will have seen that I introduced something called a stateful functional component. And that's what we're going to create here using a really cool feature called React hooks. Now, if you'd like to read more about React hooks and how those work, I'm going to link the ReactJS documentation down to that because they just do a lot better job as an overall usage of hooks in general. We're only going to be focusing on one simple hook, and that is the use state hooks, which allows us to set an initial state and then allows us to change that state with a second variable, which I will show you here in a few minutes. But for now, we're going to hop into git bash here. And we're going to simply write the command, which is npx create react app, and then after that the name. So npx create react app, and then what you should know about this part is that it needs to be all lowercase. If you have something uppercase, then it will not work, and it'll actually tell you it won't work. So if I do like this won't work, then you should see here in just a second that it didn't work because there's capital letters. So we will redo that, and I'm just going to hit up on the arrow key, and that brings my last command back. And now I'm going to do, let's see, counter component app, and we'll hit enter. And it's going to run through a lot of packages to install, and I'm just going to kind of let that work its way through, and then I'll come back and we'll dive a little deeper into this and get it done. All right, so now that that has finished, we're going to change our directory into the project folder that we just created, doing cd counter. And what I'm going to do from here is just hit tab, because it knows what the folder name is at that point. And even if you have something like counter component form, what it'll do is it'll just autocomplete to here, and then you can do like an A and hit tab again, and that'll work. And then I'm going to go into it, and you can see at the end and git bash, and it might be too small. We can go a little bit higher up here. You can see right here that it says master. And what that means is that the create react app executable has actually created an instance in GitHub, or not GitHub, but Git in general. And so that you can actually track all your files without having to do the git init command. So now that we've done that, it's time to open this up in VS Code. I have the command pre-done. So it's going to be code dot. The dot just means the current directory. Hit enter, and then that's going to open up. And I'm going to put it on this side for now. All right, so on the left side, we have our old application that we're going to be replicating over here in the React application. The first thing I want you to look at is the difference between the folder structure from here and over here. The index file is found in the public folder, which is right here. And of course, there's a lot more stuff here. There's some different meta tags. There's a lot of comments. But the most important things I want you to see are right here. We have the no script. I have the no script. I have the root and the root. And the only thing that is different on here is there is not a file right here because React will figure that out with the package.json file here, which has a little package called ReactJS that will use something called Webpack to compile everything down into index.html with the root. When you run a command that's called build, which is right here, which is what you run to deploy your application out into a production environment, then it'll create a new index file with some scripts that are added onto that particular file. So now that I've kind of showed you the difference of these two folder structures, one thing I do want you to know that everything we're doing is inside of source, and app.js is the thing that compiles down into the index.js file, which for us would be main.js. And as you saw in the reactjs.org, they had an app that then gets appended into the root, which is how we're doing it here, right here. And all we're doing on this file is calling that, but this is where it's actually getting appended, and then that's how that works. So I'm going to open up the integrated terminal in VS Code, and as you saw in here, there's some scripts that we can run. And so I'm going to run the start command, which starts the server for this application. Before we get into starting the server, I'm going to add a file called a .env file. And this is a file that allows me to define variables for this specific environment. So one of those variables that I'm going to define is called browser equals none. Browser is the variable and none is the value of that. And all this does is when I run the command in here, it doesn't automatically open up a browser. It allows me to decide what browser I want that in. And I just want to make sure that it's in the same window as my recording. So we're going to do npm run start and hit enter. And this will take a few minutes because this is the first creation of the project. And then it'll load really quick. And there we have it. So we have the first build of our React application. You can see that this is kind of the default install. And it's telling you if you want to edit a component to change this, you have to edit in this src, which means source, and then it's app.js. And then all you have to do is you just have to save to reload, which is a really nice feature in React. So we'll come back here. I'm going to save this, close these two files because we don't need those anymore, and then app.js. And we're just going to put something down here that says hello world. And we'll hit save, and without changing anything, you'll see that it's already refreshed this page to say hello world. And it actually hasn't refreshed the page. It's only refreshed the component, just like how in here when we're clicking through, it's refreshing this. Okay, so now that we've started the application, made sure that it worked, we're going to clean up a few files over here because we just don't need them anymore. And the first file we're going to get rid of for now is app.test.js. I'm going to come back and do an entire series on testing in React for front-end components. It's kind of similar to writing tests for backend, but it's just different. So that'll be probably a series of videos of different commands that you can do. I'm also going to get rid of the logo file, which is right here. We'll hit delete. And I'll keep these for now. They're not really going to be getting used for these purposes. And then I'm also going to get rid of the app.css file. And then for now, I'll just keep in the index.css file just for some basic formatting. It's not really needed, but that's all right. You'll see over here that it says failed to compile. And that's because over here in app.js, we are using some of the assets that are not available anymore because we've deleted them. When we are talking about exporting files, I mentioned that there's two types of exports. One that's a default export, and then one that is not a default export. And the difference between those two on the imports was you had to use curly braces if it wasn't a default, and in this case, no curly braces if it is the default. Also, when it's the default, you don't need to name it the same exact name that you're using in the component. And I'll show you that when we move over the counter component over here. So we're not using these files, so we don't need those. Likely in here, we're not using this, and I'll come back to how we use images in the next video. We don't really need this anymore. And we don't need this link, but I will tell you right now that when you're defining a class, instead of saying class equals, you do class name as a camel case, and then you do equals. And actually the better way to do this is to wrap this in curly braces, because now you're writing JSX, and you can actually do some pretty cool stuff in here with just JavaScript and string literals and tertiary conditionals and a lot of other things. But we'll get to those later, and probably in the next video when we're getting to kind of the project that I wanted to get to in the beginning. So we're going to continue deleting everything in here because we don't need any of that for the counter component. We're also going to get rid of the entire function right here, which will still break this file when I hit save because app is not defined, but I'm exporting it. You have to define this before you can export it. So now that we've removed everything, you can see that the only thing that we have left is the export default app. And as I said, it depends on how you export the component, defines how you import it somewhere else. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to use React in this component. And so we're going to import React because that's the default. And then we're going to use two different imports, one called useState and then one called useEffect. And we probably won't use useEffect, but anytime that I use state, then I'm also potentially going to be using useEffect. So I always import that just in case. And then that'll be from React, which is the npm package that was installed. We'll hit save. Nothing will work because we haven't defined app. So now we're going to do const app equals nothing. We don't need any parameters right now or any properties. And then in my medium post, I said that we need a return from here like that. And then we're going to do a fragment, just like how we did a document fragment here, but it's going to be react.fragment like that, which is just basically an HTML tag. And the short form of that is you don't actually need to type React fragment. You can just do this as well, and that's the same sort of thing. You hit save, and that'll fix all the errors here. And then you can just say hello world and hit save. And now we've created our component. One thing to note about components is you generally always want to do a capital letter here, just kind of like in classes. It is just kind of the standard practice. You don't have to, but that's just what a lot of people like to do. And so it's kind of better just to join the crowd for that. So these here are hooks. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to go over hooks just yet, but the useDate hook takes in two values. It takes the initial variable, which we're going to say counter, and then the iterator that can let you change it, or in this case, set a new value which is set counter, which then is equal to use state, which takes the initial value. You don't have to set an initial value, but in this case we're doing 0, which means counter right now is equal to 0. If I console log counter, dot log counter, and then down here you can see 0. You can change this over to like a string, just like that, and you'll know it's a string when I say type of, and I'll say string. But you can also tell just because the color is different here and here. So we'll go back to just counter, and this will be just 0, like that. We don't even need the console log, just for cleanliness. And then to use set counter, we're going to define a function inside of here, and we're going to call that handle counter. Whenever you're changing the setter, it's good practice just to say handle. So handle counter equals that with no parameters. And then inside of here, we're going to return set counter. And use state, when you set it here, you get a parameter called prev state, which then gets returned as prev state plus 1, which is the same thing as doing set counter and then counter plus 1. But sometimes if you're rendering lots of things at once, or if you're doing lots of different counters, sometimes React can get confused. And so you always do prev state equals prev state plus 1, and that just kind of preserves the previous state so there's no errors. And I'll hit save, and I'll get a warning saying that I'm not using that, which is totally fine. Down here, we're going to build out the same values that we had that we are creating children of, but we don't need to create those children because we can just write normal HTML inside of here. So I'm going to change these to div tags, and then we're going to do a button, which is click me, and then we need a paragraph tag, which is count, and then we need another button that is reset button. Hit save. Now you can see it's all the same. And why it's nice to have inline CSS experience is now you can just do style equals this. And anytime you do any type of attribute in HTML, you always should have curly braces. And then in normal CSS, you could actually just do like color, or you could do color equals red. But actually what you need to do here is you need to pass in an object. And then just like in normal JavaScript, if you want to change the font family, it has to be camel case because, you know, now it's an object. And so you do font family equals, we can do Comic Sans or something like that. And we don't have Comic Sans, so of course it doesn't actually do that. But in this case, all we want to do is change the color. So it'll be color red, hit save. Now this is red. One thing when these just reload the components, it's not actually clearing the console. So I just like to do a refresh sometimes and then clear here. So now we have the handle counter. So how do we use the handle counter button? This is the same exact thing as over here with the add event listener. These are doing the same thing. So we're listening for a click. And so in the button right here, we need to add an attribute called onClick, which is the same thing, open, close curly braces. And then all we need to do is say handle counter. Hit save. And then now we can click here. And if we do a console log, console log of counter, every time I click, it's going up by 1. And then we'll do a reload, and it's back to 0. So the next thing we're going to do in here is we only want to show the reset button if the count is greater than 10. So we actually need another piece of state up here, and that's going to be a Boolean state. and Boolean is true false. So const visibility, if I can spell, and then set visibility equals use state, and the initial state that we want to set for that is false, because we don't want to see the reset button if the count isn't greater than 10. So in here we can just wrap this in a curly brace, and we can write an inline conditional, which I'll link to down in the description, called a tertiary. And we're going to say visibility, and I'll kind of write this sort of long form. So visibility is equal to true, question mark, and this right here is the if. So this means if visibility equals true. If it is, then it will show the reset button, and then you need a colon. That means else. And then for now, it's just going to be an empty string. We'll hit save, and that removes the button. If you're only returning this and you don't need this, you can actually just get rid of this and change this over to a double ampersand, which means it'll only show this if this value is true. Hit save, and it's the same exact thing. Now if you click here, you can still see that it works. Nothing is broken. I don't have a console log, so that's why you're not seeing it over here. We're going to clear this again. We're going to reload. And then over here, we're going to do a conditional. So in outside of the return, you can do normal if-else conditionals, but inside of here, they all need to be like this. If you try to do it just like normal, it's going to kind of scream at you and it won't like it. So in here, we're going to do if counter is greater than 10. Now we're going to set the visibility to true and hit save. And then click. Oh, so it's kind of weird that it's not working, but it's actually pretty obvious. And this is just me being dumb. So there's a return here, which means that everything underneath it doesn't work. So if it works, now you can see it's not grayed out. And when you click here, it's working. And I'm going to reload here. And we're going to do a console log of counter. Console.log counter. When you have a ton of console logs, it's nice just to add a little string here so you know which one you're actually counting. So we get to 10. Next one, bam. Sometimes you can see there's a bit of a lag here, and you can kind of do the bad thing and just do counter plus 1, and you just hit reload and you click, and there's always going to be a little bit of lag, and that's how this works. So it's the same thing, but just sometimes there is an issue with that, and the lag is on my browser in general, and probably also OBS, but it works. So because this is only showing up if it's greater than 10. Now this doesn't do anything, but what we'll do is we'll now define another function called const reset counter, which takes no parameters. And then all we're going to be doing is set counter to 0. And then also we're going to set the visibility to false. Hit save. And then all we need to do again is on this button here, we do on click equals that, reset counter, hit save. And we need to reload. We can do all of that. And then reset. Counter is back at 0. You can click again and it comes back, clear again. The last thing we need to do is just show the count, which is right here. So you're going to do curly braces, and then you're just going to pass counter into that. And then we'll reload. You can click up and up, reset button, back to 0. And now we have built everything, and let's clean this up just to get a good understanding of what we've done. So in about 32, 31 lines of code, we have just done what we had to do in about 70 lines of code. And this isn't clean, but basically 65-ish lines of code is done in about 30 lines of code. And we can do so much more here, but just from going from all of this code here into all of this, it's obvious why people will just go straight to React without learning this part first. But understanding this part makes this so much easier. So in the next video, we're going to be adding on some inputs and working towards a different project here, which I've linked to a few different times, and that's just my devtips.show website, where I have the different links that go out to different places. And you might see this sort of stuff on Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok, and they're just web pages that have links. There's a company called Linktree, and so this is actually a React component or multiple components, and we're going to be building this out. And yeah, I'm really excited to get deeper into React, kind of work with controlled and uncontrolled components, handling validation, and then at some point adding a backend to this with Node.js and MongoDB. If you got this far, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps me. I actually read the comments, or most of them, and I replied to pretty much everyone that gives me feedback. I love feedback, as it's obvious by now. I'm trying to get better at this every single time I do a new video, a quicker intro, coming back to you on the outro, and now I'm even trying with a camera during the video, even though that camera is not really as high resolution as this camera. I'm still trying it out. So let me know what you think.